I think we are live.
Perfect. Hello, everybody watching. My name is Stephanie. I'm delighted to be here today talking to all of you, and I'm joined by David. Hi, David.
Hello, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everybody.
Exactly. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I know we have people watching all over the world, don't we? Which is fantastic. And you're joining us today for the first in a new series of News Talk. And we're very excited about this, aren't we?
Yeah, indeed, because, listening and reading to authentic news stories is such an important part and a way of learning English, and it will really help students improve their English. And that's why we really wanted to focus on this today.
Absolutely. So the theme, what we're going to be doing, the format of this is we're going to be looking at three stories making headlines around the world at the moment. So these are all topical stories that hopefully you might have read about in your own language, and we're going to give you the opportunity to join in with us as we discuss them in English.
Yeah,
We should
what we want you to do is we want you to comment, to give your opinions, and we're going to ask you some questions, and we'd like you that you might know the answers to, you may not, but we'd love you to participate and tell us what you think.
Absolutely. And please don't worry about making any mistakes. That's not the point of the session today. What we really want to do is to find out about your ideas, your opinions. What do you think about the stories we have chosen? Do you have any information to add to the story? So there's lots of ways that you can join in and share your opinions and your views.
So, shall we start?
Let's get started. And I think possibly, David, to begin with, we should possibly introduce ourselves again. So would you like to begin?
That's a good idea. Hello again, I'm David. I'm the managing director of Perfectly Spoken, and I'm joined by Stephanie.
Yes, so I'm Stephanie Marston, and my role is the head of educational content. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. Let's get started with our three stories. Now, we've chosen, as we said, three stories that are making headlines around the world. What do you know about these three stories? So, the first one we're going to be talking about, a super famous person, Elon Musk. Now, he's making headlines because he's reached a deal to buy Twitter. But I wonder if you know how much he has spent.
And then after that, we're going to look at the leading cause, leading reason why children in the US have died in 2020. Have you any idea what the biggest cause is? You might have a clue in the picture, actually.
I
But
was going to say, there's a bit of a clue there, isn't there?
but please feel free to write in and let us know what you think.
Absolutely, and quite a controversial one that. So hopefully you'll have some opinions and views that you'd like to share with us. And then we're going to finish today with story number three, talking about the world's oldest woman who has sadly now died. But do you know what age she reached?
Do you know
Any
what age she
ideas?
reached? And also, do you know where she was from?
That's a really good follow-up question there. So if you'd like to join in, it's really easy. Please type in a message. Let us know what you think about either or any, sorry, of these three stories. Okay, shall we get started, David?
Why not?
Okay, so let's start with our first story. Now, the headline here, Elon Musk reaches deal to buy Twitter for $44 billion. What a phenomenal amount. And of course, Twitter, the famous social media platform.
And do you know how? I mean, we know he's very, very rich, but do you know what percentage of his total wealth, the total money that he possesses, is at that 44 million?
Well, I think I read something like he contributed around 30 billion of his own funds. Was that correct?
That's possibly correct, but the total of 44 billion is actually about 20% of his total
Of his
worth.
total.
So that gives you an idea of how rich he is.
Absolutely. So while it perhaps seems like an out of this world amount for us, for Elon Musk, perhaps it's a drop in the ocean.
Indeed. And of course it's quite controversial that he has bought Twitter. Do you know how many followers he has, this man?
Well, I did actually read about this as well. I think he's got something incredible, like
83
83 million followers,
million
which again,
followers on Twitter. Yeah.
an incredible an incredible amount there. I think one of the interesting things about this story, of course, Elon Musk, world famous, we all know how super rich he is, but his takeover bid wasn't welcome at first. He wasn't a welcome bidder for Twitter. The people who owned the platform didn't want him to be successful in this takeover. So I thought that was quite an interesting fact that despite all this wealth, he wasn't the first choice.
Yeah, and indeed, and apparently, I think they were trying not for the deal to go ahead, and then they performed what they call a U-turn. And a U-turn is when you change your mind about something.
Absolutely. I believed once he'd revealed his financing package, how he was going to fund this, where the money was going to come from, then indeed they did a U turn and changed their minds and accepted his bid for the takeover. Musk has said that he believes that for Twitter to grow and become a genuine platform for free speech, it needs to be taken private. So perhaps that's one of his driving motivations there.
Yeah, and I think another interesting thing that I read is that in in the States, the Republicans, I think, are quite enthusiastic about this takeover, and I think they're quite hopeful that he will allow Donald Trump to come back onto Twitter because, of course, he was banned before.
Absolutely. There's a
I
lot
wonder
of
what our students think about that. Whether anybody thinks that Donald Trump should be allowed back on Twitter. Would you like to see him there?
interesting. Yes, I wonder what people think. And there's been a lot of talk about that. Who's going to be allowed back? A lot of people have been banned, of course, Trump being one of the most famous of them. And there's a lot of talk and controversy surrounding that. Will they be allowed back on the platform? So I think you'll notice, hopefully, as we've been talking about this topic, we've selected some vocabulary for you. So underneath the headline here, we've got three keywords that hopefully you've noticed David and I using to discuss this story. We've got takeover, platform, and bid. So one of the reasons why this format, why using the news and talking about the news is such a great way to improve your vocabulary, is because you can really see the words being used in context. So shall we have a look at the definitions here, David?
Why not?
Okay, so the three words we were talking about in bold here on the slide, and we've included here the definitions for you. But really important when we're thinking about new vocabulary to see it being used in context so you can see how to use it, because often words and expressions can have more than one meaning.
And of course, so there's the definition of takeover. So it says a situation in which a company gets control of another company by buying enough of its shares. And of course, takeover there is a noun, but it's also a verb. A company takes over another company.
Absolutely. I can see that we've got Misa saying hello in the chat. Thank you so much for
I
joining us, Misa. I hope you're enjoying the stories we've selected for today. As David said, yeah, we've got the definition there for takeover, can be a noun and a verb. We've also got platform, the type of computer system or software that's used. We're talking about Twitter as a social media platform. But notice I also talked about it as a platform for free speech, so we can use it in a more metaphorical sense as well.
And then, of course, bid again. here it's a noun, but it can also be a verb. So it's an offer by a person to pay a particular amount of money for something. And it's very frequently used when you talk about auctions as well, isn't it? You know, you bid for an object or something that is available in the auction.
Absolutely. So we talked about Elon Musk's bid for Twitter, how much money he offered in order to buy it. Good. Let's move on to story number 2. So our question for story number 2 was, what was the leading cause, the leading killer of US children in 2020?
And
And
the sad answer is guns. And this is the first time that guns or firearms have become the main cause, the main reason that children have died. And in this context, when we're talking about the children, we're talking about young children and adolescents. So an adolescent is up to the age of 19. And I think what was quite surprising for me when I looked at this, it's a total of about, well, have you any idea, Stephanie, of how many US children were killed by guns in 2020?
absolutely no idea, David. It's a statistic I'm fear probably is higher than I would like to think.
Well, in total, I think I read it was about 4,300 young Americans who were killed by guns. And the total number of people in the US goes up to 45,000. These are firearm gun related deaths. And that's the equivalent of 124 every day. um,
Incredible.
which is a bit bit concerning, isn't it? So so guns are the main killer, and then they've taken over. Any ideas on what other causes that are in the list of the of things that kill children?
Well, that's a good question for those watching. What do you think? There's a clue there perhaps in the selected words, but do you have any other ideas of what other causes of deaths of children and adolescents might be? I'm going to obviously go with homicide there,
Yeah.
possibly suicide as well.
Yeah, I mean that is very true. And actually, more than that, in the past, it was actually car crashes, and then we talk
Okay,
about road rage, where people get very angry because they get frustrated when they are caught in traffic, and then that anger becomes so bad that you even get killings from it. Homicide is an interesting word, isn't it? Because we get many of our words from Latin, and side means the act of killing, and homi means of a person. So it's the killing of a person or a murder. And then Stephanie, you talked about suicide as well, and again the act of killing, but of oneself.
oneself.
When you kill oneself, you commit suicide. So suicide, homicide, and then road rages. Apparently, the number of deaths caused by road rages increased by, I don't know, something like 20% during the pandemic.
Interesting fact there. And I think road rage is another interesting word because it's a good example of how we can use the language and adapt it for different situations. So, David talking about road rage, of course, when people become angry and violent on the road, but we can apply it the same logic, for example, to people becoming angry and violent on aeroplanes. What do you think that might be called?
How about air rage?
Air rage, that's a very good guess. Yes. So again, a good example of how we can play with the language and use it to serve the purposes we need for different situations. So shall we have a look at the definitions here?
Yeah, sure, sure. So the cause, yeah, it means the reason why something happens, particularly something bad. Because is when you talk about the reason for something. And I would say another cause is the number of guns that there are in the United States, which I also read. There's a total of 390 million guns in
Wow.
the US.
Again, another controversial topic, gun control, gun laws. Different countries obviously having very different laws and different views on possessing weapons, owning guns. Of course, the US famous for its gun laws. Moving on to word number 2, we've got homicide, which David expertly explained is the act of killing another person here.
So you could say murder, couldn't you? Yeah,
Absolutely,
because
you could.
it's particularly murder it's an unlawful killing when you are killing somebody illegally.
Absolutely. And that's that with intent. I think the law differentiates it from other kinds of killing where there's more accidents involved, perhaps. So homicide and murder, it's with intent. And finishing here with road rage. So, as we said, it's an anger or violence between drivers, often caused by difficult driving conditions or people behaving in ways that other people violently disagree with.
Yes, I mean, have you ever suffered road rage, Stephanie? I think if I'm
Fortunately,
honest, occasionally when you're
if
stressed and you get frustrated.
fortunately, the extent of it would be me hooting my horn. That's the extent of any road rage as far as I'm
Good.
concerned.
Yes, yes.
Good. So hopefully, for those of you joining us, welcome. Hopefully you can see how we're using the language here. So as we move on to our third and final story, have a look at the selected words and see if you can identify when David and I use them in conversation. So story number 3, we were talking about the world's oldest woman, and we asked you how old and where do you think she was from? Here we can see she died at the age of 119 and she lived in Japan. So this is
So,
Kane Tanaka.
so of course, if she was 119, she must have been born in
Oh, 1903.
1903. I noticed Stephanie said there '03. Yeah, not 193, 1903. Yeah, it's a
Quick bit
long,
of maths there,
long
David, putting me
time
on the spot.
ago.
Now, what I really like about this story is that obviously, having reached such an old age, people have been very interested in Kane Tanaka's lifestyle. And she revealed in an interview that she, throughout her life, has been very partial to chocolate and fizzy drinks, which I like that. I think it's something that a lot of people can probably relate to.
Yeah, I'm not particularly partial to the fizzy drinks. Yeah,
More the
chocolate,
chocolate.
yes, yes,
I'm definitely
yes.
partial to
to,
chocolate.
to, to some chocolate. But isn't that wonderful? So yeah, chocolate is okay. It's good for you. Well, for some people. Um, I think she also, looking at it, she put her she credited her longevity, her long life, to her faith in God. I think that's very common with many people. Her family, her sleep, her hope, um, eating good food. I'm not sure if chocolate and fizzy drinks is particularly good food, and which I think is quite an interesting one, practicing mathematics. So
Oh,
she obviously was very agile with her mind doing mathematics.
I'm not sure about the mathematics. I think I prefer to keep my mind agile with things like crossword puzzles, perhaps the odd Sudoku, but not so much the mathematics.
And apparently, I mean, in Japan, the population is dwindling. It's reducing. It's going down quite rapidly, and the population is dwindling, and the population overall is aging. It's becoming older. So I suspect that's quite worrying trends for Japanese society.
Absolutely, creating social issues, social problems. I wonder what it's like where you live. For those viewers we've got watching us today, do you feel like your country has an aging population? Are there many centenarians in your country now? Centenarian. I wonder if anyone can guess what this might be. David?
I think there's a clue if you think of another similar words like century, is going to be 100, isn't it? So presumably a centenarian is the noun. It's a person who is over 100 years old.
Absolutely. And there's an incredible statistic of the number of centenarians living in Japan. Any ideas, David?
Ooh, I wouldn't have a clue on that one. No,
Well, I
a
think
lot.
there's a lot. There's a lot. But one of the really interesting things is that 9 out of 10 of the centenarians are women.
I
So
wonder why. I wonder why women live longer than men. Anybody got any ideas?
I think that's a really interesting fact. The actual statistic is
Yeah.
86,510, and 9 out of every 10 are women. So fascinating fact. As David said, anyone got any insight into why that might be?
So okay, that's a brilliant. Well, and actually then, so now Kane Tanaka has died. Do you know who the oldest woman in the world is now?
I had a suspicion you might ask me this question, so I think I do know. Does she live in France?
She certainly does. And her age?
Her age, I believe, is 118.
So yeah, so she will soon be as old. And yes, she was or she is a nun, a Catholic nun, and apparently she kept on working until she was 108 years old.
108, that's incredible.
But of course, neither of these ladies are the oldest woman ever. How about that one?
Now,
Do you
I
know
didn't
how
expect
old
this one. Hmm.
the oldest woman ever to live? And of course, there's always a debate about verifying, and how it's proven. But officially, from what I've seen, the oldest woman was
I'm going to go with 125.
not bad, not quite that, but apparently she was 122 and 164 days. Jean Calment from
France?
From France. I think there's something in the water in France.
Something in the lifestyle there, yes. I can see that Misa is telling us that in the comments that in her country, the lifespan is between 60 and 80.
Right. So it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, in I think in Europe the ages are getting a lot higher, aren't they? I,
Absolutely.
it'd be interesting. Where's Misa from? Do we know? Can you tell
Um,
us, Misa?
Misa, would you like to type in the chat where you're from? I believe I know, but if you'd like to type in the chat, that would be great. Shall we have a look at the definitions then for this slide? So hopefully, as we were speaking, you noticed we were talking about what Kane Tanaka was partial to. I said she's partial to chocolate and fizzy drinks. If you're partial to something, it means having a liking. You like something. Maisa is from Lebanon.
Lebanon, lovely. Thank you. Yeah, partial to. I mean, and I know quite a few elderly people, ladies in particular, who are partial to a sherry or a little glass of wine with their dinner. I think
My
that's
grandmother
right.
was one of them, David, and she lived till 95. So a good sign there, I think.
And then we looked at dwindling, as we said. So that's when something gradually, slowly becomes less or smaller.
And then finally, centenarian, someone who is 100 years old or more is a centenarian. So that's the key language from that news story. So, David, would you like to perhaps talk a little bit about Newsflash?
Sure. So this is all part of all these articles and a lot more you will find on our website on perfectlyspoken.com under Newsflash. And Newsflash, we have devised with our partner Reuters, what we have are lots of interesting, very short videos in natural, authentic English with different English accents, which is a great way for you to get used to listening to natural English. And then what we've done is we create activities, exercises, vocabulary explanations around them. And they're all quite short. You can do it in 5 minutes, but it's a great way to help you improve your English, particularly your listening and your reading comprehension. And these 3 stories, for example, are all in Newsflash. So you can go back and practice what we've been showing you today, but also you can learn other vocabulary related to those stories.
Absolutely, and it's so important learning vocabulary in context. We keep talking about it, and Newsflash really will help you learn with a very clear context. Often you know the news story before, it's not something surprising for you. You can predict a lot of unknown vocabulary, which again is a really key skill, especially for those students who are perhaps taking an exam. Predicting unknown vocabulary through context is really vital. So really important for increasing your vocabulary and using authentic English. This is real English. It's not taken from a old-fashioned textbook. This is English that's being used now at the moment. And
And
hopefully, sorry,
And
David.
also, sorry, Stephanie. I think, as you said before, hopefully these stories are very topical. So what you do in your own language is then you bring your knowledge of the subject. So
Absolutely.
then hopefully that makes it more relevant, interesting, and possibly easier because you are bringing your knowledge of the subject with you.
Absolutely, and hopefully through listening to us talking about these news stories today, you've had access to a lot of authentic English, and you've really enjoyed yourself as well.
So hopefully you are already part of our truly global English language learning community. We have students from over 190 countries. If you haven't joined us, please do. Just go to perfectlyspoken.com. And also next week, we'll be back, won't we,
Same
Stephanie?
time, same place, with 3 different stories to talk about. And again, really interested to know your views, opinions. So please do join us then. That's 5 p.m. London time on Monday, every Monday.
Every Monday. See you then.
See you
Thanks for
then.
joining us.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.